God, I could hit record. There we go. Great. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Jen O'Donnell. I'm the Executive Director of BioNB, coming to you from my kitchen in Fredericton. And I'd really like to welcome you to episode 2 in our Atlantic BioCon virtual speaker series. Today, we're pleased to welcome TJ Gagliardi and Darren Burke of Outcast Foods. So first, I just wanted to go through a few important points about the platform and the session. This session will be recorded and we'll make it available online as soon as we can. I will go ahead and share the links in the chat box here on Zoom to where you can view episode 1 and keep your eye out for episode 2 if you'd like to watch it again. Second point is if you have any technical challenges during this presentation, please put a comment into the chat box and we'll respond as best we can. And after the presentation, this is my third point, we'll have time for Outcast to answer some questions from the audience. So to facilitate that, please type your questions into the Q&A box and I will moderate the discussion towards the end of the hour. Okay, so back to today. We're really excited to bring you episode 2 in our virtual speaker series. And I want to acknowledge our partners in hosting Atlantic BioCon. Those are the Nova Scotia Innovation Hub, CCNB-Innov and Ignite Atlantic. It's been a real pleasure to work with all of them as we put this series together. I know many of you in the audience participated in last month's session with Ensign, and that was hosted by my colleague Rod Badcock. He's the Executive Director of the Nova Scotia Innovation Hub. And if you're not familiar with them, they're doing really great work to advance projects all over the region in the bioeconomy. So thanks to everyone who's taken the time to join us for this series, and we hope you'll come back for more as we do this every month. So in the spirit of the in-person conference we usually hold in May, we decided to go online, and we've been inviting engaging speakers to provide their views on many bioeconomy topics from around Atlantic Canada and around the world. And we all felt it was really important now, more than ever, to continue to facilitate these kind of discussions about the potential in the bioeconomy and to provide updates on what's happening in this space from around Atlantic Canada. Coming back to today, I'm sure you've all heard that food security and food resiliency in this region has been a really hot topic due to the disruption of supply chains for food that we've seen due to COVID-19 and other factors. To me, these developments have raised a lot of questions. What can we do better here? And what role can technology play? And so in that context, we're really thrilled to have TJ and Darren here today from Outcast Foods for today's session. Outcast has a process. They're already transforming the world of nutrition. Their facilities can upcycle surplus produce, which would otherwise go to waste, and they create plant powders that can be used in NHPs, as meat alternatives, as pet foods, and cosmetics. So before I hand it over to Darren, who's going to start, I wanted to remind you to submit your questions in the Q&A box. If you put your questions in the chat box, we might not get around to answering them, so the Q&A is the place to pose your burning questions, and we'll answer them at the end of the talk. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Darren Burke.
I see Gally up there. Welcome and thanks everyone. First, thanks Jennifer and for setting this up. I think it's a great opportunity. Most of us are trapped in our homes these days with COVID-19, and our business and life is forever changed as a result of it. So let me jump in. I'll tell you a little bit about myself and then move on to talk about our business. So I'm a maritimer, first and foremost. I grew up in a community just outside the city. Did my undergrad and grad school, part of it here at Dalhousie in Halifax, and then moved away and did a PhD and was surprised to get a tenure track position as a professor back east, and I moved back and did that for a little while, and then got interested in starting a business, commercialized my research and made pills and powders and started selling them in retail locations. And to make a long story short, that seemed like a wild ride in 5.5 years from startup to a terrific exit with an American company. And during that time, learned retail distribution, learned marketing, learned about R&D, met lots of interesting people. And along the way, one of those interesting people is my now very nicely groomed, fresh haircut co-founder on the other side there. I haven't been lucky to get the haircut yet. That's tomorrow. An interesting start for me. So scientist first, business guy second. Had a 5-year non-compete after I sold my last company, traveled to the West Coast, spent time living in California and then Vancouver. And then after my 5-year non-compete, decided if I'm going to start another business, I would do that back in my hometown and moved back to Nova Scotia, I guess 3 years ago now when we started this business. And it's been an exciting ride ever since. Before I jump in and tell you about Outcast Foods, I thought it'd be good to introduce my co-founder and let him tell some stories, because we all know these hockey guys have plenty of stories. So off to TJ.
Yeah, thanks, DB, and thanks, Jen, for the great intro, talking a little about the food waste issue that we're all dealing with. And we'll get into that certainly very shortly. But I don't have as long of a background story as Darren does. I played hockey for 10 years, so that's my past. Was a bit of a wild ride as well. Played all over the place in the U.S. and then 1 year in Sweden, 2 years in Russia to end my career. And I'm glad Darren jumped in at the start and talked a little bit about his past. And the unique thing about that is after he sold his business, he signed a 5-year non-compete, and possibly serendipity, possibly luck, the timing of that worked out well with the timing of the end of my playing career. His 5-year non-compete basically ran out exactly when I was getting ready to retire, and I think it pushed me into the direction of business and away from hockey. And I could have played probably till I was 40 in various leagues all over Europe, but definitely glad things worked out. And I guess I'll jump in a little. I'll give the easy parts about how Outcast was created, and then I always leave the hard sciencey questions to the scientist, Darren. But we figured we would get into the supplement space initially, where Darren had so much success when we decided we were going to start a business together. And we were looking for ways to differentiate, because everyone knows there's probably 5,000 supplement companies around the globe. So one thing that we realized that companies hadn't really tapped into was food waste. You really can't open a newspaper or a magazine without seeing an article about food waste and how much perfectly edible produce in particular is ending up in landfills for no reason other than typically cosmetics or supply chain error. So we thought we'd do it the easy way. We thought we'd find a company that was taking some of this surplus and dehydrating it, and we'd use that as part of our formulations in our powders, our protein powder in particular. And we realized pretty quickly that actually no one was doing this. So we looked at it as a massive opportunity, first of all. And being two entrepreneurial guys, we couldn't really turn away from it, even though we didn't know anything about food waste and we didn't know anything about dehydrating fruits and vegetables. But luckily in Canada, there's some great partnerships, one of which was National Research Council. We ended up partnering with them on 3 different projects. And then we worked with 4 Canadian universities to come up with our own unique drying process. And then all the while we were essentially becoming food waste experts. So we figured out kind of where it happens, why it happens, and the opportunities that lie within, which anyone who knows anything about food waste, there's plenty of opportunity and plenty of waste. So our original partnership in the procurement side of surplus fruits and vegetables came with a national grocer that just happened to be up the road from our office in Halifax, and that's Sobeys. So we have great partnership with them, and mainly out of their distribution center. So anyone who knows anything about grocer, there's plenty of waste that comes from their distribution centers. So for a variety of reasons, typically its product arrives a little too late, and it doesn't make sense for them to ship it out to all their stores in the region, even though when it arrives, it's perfectly edible. So you'd be shocked at some of the stuff that they have to throw out just because logistically it doesn't make sense. And traditionally, before we arrived, their model was to pay a trucking company, a waste management company, to come haul it away and send it to a landfill or an organic waste facility. So needless waste right there. And then now with our partnership, we're able to go in there and essentially cherry pick whatever we want from their surplus section, which is a pretty vast variety and pretty vast quantity section. There's I don't want to say the numbers because we've signed NDAs, but it's shocking how much waste they have. And then naturally we started to work our way upstream. We started working with food processors and food manufacturers. I'm sure a number of you recently saw our partnership that we announced with Greenhouse Juice. They're Canada's largest juice company. So that's an exciting one for us, where we're going to be taking their juice pulp, which they have about 100,000 kilos a week. So the numbers are pretty large there. And then lastly, we moved our way up naturally to farms. And pre-COVID, we were working with farms mainly to take their unsaleable goods, so traditionally regarded as misfit or ugly produce. So an example would be cauliflower, a head of cauliflower that's a little too big or a little too small, that a grocer or a food broker wouldn't want to purchase because it doesn't fit their specs. And then post-COVID, with the decimation of the food service industry, that led to a lot of calls for us and a lot of further opportunity to working with more farms on taking some of their produce that they couldn't sell because they had no one to sell it to. So that's kind of where our inbound side goes. And then our outbound side has been interesting because we've already expanded our processing facility twice in Halifax, and now some of our customers, they're growing every day, and some of them are large multinationals that are looking for gigantic quantities. So we've been walking this tightrope of having customers while also not trying to bring on too many new ones, which is a weird thing for a business to do. But it's been a wild ride, and with COVID, it's really forced a lot of companies to reassess their supply chain and look for more North American ingredients like ours. So that's kind of the elevator pitch, so to speak, of what we do. And happy to field any questions and let Darren jump in if he wants to add anything.
I think I'll jump in. I mean, TJ does a terrific job of summarizing what we've been up to. For those of you interested in the business space, it's definitely a complicated time during COVID-19. I mean, as it is with a business in startup mode, there's plenty of challenges. And for us, we've got this unique situation of we've got this large supply of waste stream on one side, and TJ identified them: waste stream from grocers, waste stream from food manufacturers and processors, and then of course waste stream from farmers, which we've discovered, of course, is the most pristine and the freshest, and ideally we want to work more with that side of it. But we're addressing, that whole issue of waste. So we've got a terrific amount of data on the waste side, and as a business, we're also working on securing our customers, right, and growing our customer base. And I know this talk is primarily about COVID-19, and we've seen just an explosion of interest, and it's because of this, so many more eyes on supply chain for food, and it's an eerie feeling when everything got shut down and grocery store, walking into a grocery store wasn't like it typically was. It was an eerie feeling to go in, to think that potentially you could get sick by being in the grocery store. So I think both customers and also companies that deal with the supply chain of food, it's a genuine mounting concern. And we did a call earlier today with a large multinational company all over the world, and it's one of the number one things that come up. They wonder about our supply chain, the traceability, the origin, and all the touch points along the way as it makes its way to them to process and then package and then put out to their customers. And companies are looking for that assurance and peace of mind to know that it's a safe supply chain, and it's I guess, clean supply chain, for lack of a better word. So it is an interesting spot. We're a startup business, and by no means were we not affected by COVID-19. We, like many companies, we had to make some changes with our staff complement in the office. Most of us are working remotely with the exception of our production team. Because we're in the food service business, we've been able to continue to work, and our production people are on the floor and processing fruits and vegetables. So it's been an interesting journey, to say the least. It's good to have a co-founder. My last go around, I didn't have one. I say that now. There's times where I said it's not good to have a co-founder, and I'm sure TJ has too. We're a bit of the yin and yang, and I think that's the reason why we've been successful to date. We're certainly not out of the woods in regards to turning the business into a real efficient and scalable business, but we get better week over week. We just get more processes in place and more systematic. We're in a real interesting growth phase right now. We can't supply the customer demand, which is a good problem, but nevertheless, it's still a problem. We have to finance this next growth for us as a company. And that's been really interesting for me as a second time, I guess, or repeat entrepreneur. The first business I grew on cash flow and with great support from a of course, but no partners and no investors. And now I think we're over 30 investors and shareholders, and embarking on a pretty significant fundraising round that started out in a really frothy, wonderful environment for funding startups to be hit midway through our pitching with the shutdown of borders. So that too has been an interesting journey, making our way through continuing to capitalize the business as we need to in order to grow. And I think, happy to answer any more questions. I think everybody on the phone here probably has a stake or a vested interest in some of the things that are going on, or you work with other clients and may have some questions or things that we've experienced already that maybe we can shed some light on.
That's great, Darren and TJ. Thanks for that overview. Really interesting, and really appreciate hearing, some of the challenges you're facing even in the past weeks and months around COVID-19. I know there's folks in the audience that could identify with some of those. We do have a couple questions already, and I'd encourage anyone else to type in the questions to the question and answer box, and then we'll talk about them. I wanted to start out by saying this audience and the group that joins us every year in person, there's a significant technical component. We get grad students who are chemical engineers, professors working in agriculture, consultants who do engineering and process. And so I think a lot of folks would be interested, and only share what you're willing to share, but what is some of the technical hurdles to doing this, or what's involved in the process where you make the powders? If there's anything you could share on that side.
Yeah, happy to share on that. I mean, it's I think the biggest challenge we experienced throughout this has really been the logistical piece, like the shipping and logistical challenges of bringing waste stream material into a facility, and then deciding what gets processed and what doesn't get processed. And I think if you just think about the different locations of where a surplus food is being generated, and then it has to make its way to a processing facility. And I don't know that we have it perfected by any stretch, but we developed a grading system essentially of what we're willing to take and what we're not willing to take. Initially, I think we were overly ambitious and said we'll take everything, but then all we became was just another I don't want to use the term landfill site, but we became another dumping ground for folks that are trying to get rid of their waste. So a big part of it was educating everybody involved in that supply chain, look, like early stage stuff, we can take it very quickly, but if it's been sitting in your green bin for a week, nobody can do anything with it type thing. So I think that was probably the biggest challenge, is the supply chain side, is the shipping logistics. The technical pieces of our process, I think they're fairly typical challenges from a manufacturer or food processor. Like, how do you inbound it? What are the touch points along the way as you unload a truck and then process it and turn it into a finished good to be packaged up? We've invested in learning about the best drying technology. So from a technological standpoint, we have taken the most innovative and the most energy efficient process. And again, we're a sustainable company, so the last thing we wanted to do was to have equipment and machinery that was very carbon heavy in terms of a footprint to process. So we picked the most economical ways to do the conversion. The challenge with, of course, picking the most innovative technology is it hasn't been around long enough to be tried and true and tested from a recipe standpoint. So our intellectual property is a combination of a unique series of steps in the process, married with a unique recipe or protocol for every different fruit and vegetable in order to get the optimum finished good quantity and quality. So that's taken 3 years to figure those recipes out.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can totally appreciate that. There's a related question here from the audience. Question is it more complicated from a process perspective to manage multiple feedstocks? And you touched on this a little bit already. So in other words, if you had one consistent feedstock, such as the juice pulp waste, would that be an advantage, or would be an advantage to templating the production process and consistent end product?
Yeah, I think there's definitely an argument that could be made to work on one thing first, figure it out and figure it out in its entirety. And we do have we started out taking on everything, and we've peeled it back to, it started as a top 3, but due to customer interest, it became a top 5, and we're even pushing it into a top 6 now. And as a result of the requests from the juicing companies is a good example. But yeah, we're pretty good at, we're very good at 3 different types of produce. We're really good at 5, and we're working on getting really good at the 6th. And then the next step, I guess, in that question or that equation is, when you bump up the scale, how many processing lines and what does it look like? And I think that's kind of where we are as a company. We could decide to go out and become the best juice pulp processing company and be really good and large scale at that. But I don't know that that would address all of our existing customer demands. And some of it is kind of dictated by customers. So the last thing we would want to do is invest a large amount of capital and resources on a waste recovery stream that we don't really have a customer base that would support that kind of investment. So it's a delicate dance as to next moves and decisions. I think that's fairly typical of something new like this.
Awesome. Another question we received is, are there any efforts by Outcast Foods to solve food waste at the grassroots, such as raising awareness to consumers of perfectly edible produce which are out of spec?
Yeah, there are. So we're members of the Zero Waste Council, which has plenty of different outreach, I guess, programs that they push to help consumers learn a little more about food waste. And then we're also members of the Upcycled Food Association, which is a great organization that works with companies in our field that are upcycling any sort of food surplus into new products. So there's companies that are making protein bars, there's companies that are making cookies, and all the way to pet food. So they do a pretty good job of outreach and teaching consumers actually what upcycled is, because I'll tell you what, I didn't know what upcycled meant 3 years ago, 4 years ago. But now it's becoming more mainstream. You're kind of seeing it on packaging now. And we like to say that upcycled is the new organic. you're going to see it more and more. And as far as consumers go, the number two buying factor behind taste is sustainability. So I think that's part of the reason why our company's been so busy as well. Is there's companies that are in the market that have had products for years, and now they're trying to find ways to tap into food waste and sustainability. So we're almost like a cheat code for them, where let's say they're only buying products from us that handle about 5% or 10% of their final formulation. The number one thing that they're marketing is sustainability after they do that. So there's some cool things that are going to be that are in the works right now, and they're going to be launching soon, that you guys will see in your local grocery stores and different markets. So stay tuned for those.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a great takeaway for me, is that other companies that you're supplying are demanding this sustainability brand and evidence. So that can really drive companies like yours to innovate, to attract investment, all those things. It's really important driving factor for these types of companies. Another question from our viewers. Let's see here. Are your R&D facilities in Halifax? If you have research and development facilities, and do you plan to do more R&D for the finished powders?
Yeah, I see TJ was going to jump in on that one too. We're based here in Halifax. We're actually in Dartmouth, our facility here. R&D is a huge part of our budget moving forward. I think it will be for the foreseeable future. I just don't think there's enough known yet about waste stream material. So it's a big budgetary piece. And our day-to-day, I'd say right now, is probably 70% is R&D and 30% is production. And I see us probably carrying that always probably around 30 to 50% for the next few years.
Awesome. I like this question. Are there any waste streams? There must be from your process. What, if you think of a biorefinery, you're taking one thing and upcycling it, but I'm not sure you use the whole thing. So is there any circularity there or opportunities?
That's a good one, actually. So when we first started and we were only working with grocery, there was more waste, because you think about the stuff that we're getting from them. Every now and then there'd be early stages of mold on some product that we obviously wouldn't process, and a lot of unpackaging that we had to do. So there was more waste stream there. But then as we moved upstream to the food processors, manufacturers, and then ultimately to the farmers, the product that arrives from them isn't in packaging. So everything that we receive, we know is ready to be processed. We still do an initial inspection, but we have a really, I guess, easy to tell, flat out, we say, hey, listen, we don't want anything that has any mold. We don't want anything that even has early stages of decay from them. So it's all ready to be processed. So the waste stream levels are quite low now that we're working mainly with those streams. But I'd say the second part to that question is that we process whole powders. So we don't, I saw another question, I'm kind of jumping ahead on it, but they asked about protein fractionation, and we're not doing any isolates. So there is no waste on that front.
Okay. Cool. I might I might read the rest of that protein question. So it was around, well, I guess you're probably not doing this, but yeah. So he's asking, if you were fractionating proteins, how would you valorize the other components, the ash, the lipids? But you're just processing it as whole. That's my understanding. So that's not really a question, I suppose.
No, that's a good question if we were, but part of our R&D is trying to figure out new streams of products as well. So we have had a few companies reach out and ask if we have any isolated proteins from some of our products, and maybe down the line we will at some point. And I'll leave it to Darren to figure that one out when we actually do
that. I like this one too. Are there any dream ingredients you want to tackle?
For me, I love like sea algae. I use spirulina every day and chlorella every day, but I don't know if there's actually surplus of those. I'm assuming that the companies that grow them are just processing everything they grow, but I'm very interested in that, and certain superfoods as well that clearly aren't grown in Nova Scotia, but somewhere down the line, you never know. We had an interesting conversation with a large company today that has a big outreach program in Africa, and I'm certain there's some cool superfoods out there that we could process someday down the line.
Awesome. These are all great questions that are coming in. Let's see. Someone's asking, is your inspection process automated? Is there anything automated about analyzing the products?
We do have a manual sorting at the beginning, and part of our scale facility, so the next one we build, it'll have an automated sorting tool, and we hired an engineering firm, and they've spec'd out some really cool automated machinery. I'm a big fan of hiring local workers, but this machine can visually inspect apples and sweet potatoes, and it's just so much from a scale processing standpoint that it's a move that we have to move into. That said, like, we have 2 people that visually inspect, much like a grocery store would have visual inspection when they decide to cull us some products off the shelf. They have a culling process, and it's a visual inspection. So we've followed standard visual inspection protocols typically when we inbound our material, but in the future in our scale facility, it would be fully automated.
Awesome. Here's a question more about business and investment. So he says, since you're raising a new round of investment, is it your plan to scale up? How would you like to do that? Are you looking for more customers in the same market? Are you looking to diversify or export? And as a follow-up, when you expand, how are you going to manage your supply chain?
That's a mouthful. TJ's going to take that one, I think. We want to do everything on your whoever asked that question. We want to handle all of that. But TJ, I think you're going to jump in. You can take that one if you like.
Yeah, that's the easiest way to answer for sure is exporting. We're already actually exporting. We have customers in the U.S. and a bunch that are right around the corner, essentially, where we've already sent samples and pricing, and we're going to be exporting to Europe. So that's also part of it now, but it would just be in bigger quantities. And I think everything would just scale to a higher level because we're going to be able to process more of this surplus that we already have. And the next step for that, really, apart from getting our funding, would be to build a scale facility in Nova Scotia. So I know Rod's on the call from the hub, and he'd be excited to hear that. I know we've been talking about that for a long time, and they've been very supportive, as has ACOA, which I saw Jay and Paul are on the call. So definitely a little plug for those guys.
Awesome. Do you ever see yourselves doing contract drying for other companies, like a toll surface?
We've checked that out. We've modeled that out in a way because, you know, the way I look at this food waste problem is you could literally spin a globe, close your eyes, drop a pin, and there's going to be food waste enough for a economic model to make sense pretty much anywhere you drop that pin. So that is part of our model that we've spec'd out. But right now our focus is processing everything ourselves.
Awesome.
I think maybe the person asked if we toll dry for them, maybe. And we've been asked to toll dry, and we're so at capacity as it is. That's not to say that down the road it's not a revenue model for us to toll dry for other companies. It's interesting. One of the probably the largest CPG companies in Canada asked the same question. They work directly with farms, and they wondered if we would dry some of the kale from their Ontario farms on a toll basis. And as of right now, our drying operation is really at capacity with our own processing. But again, it's not to say that when we're at scale, it doesn't become part of what we do as a company.
Awesome. Good. Someone responding to the mention of algae, he says that the valorization of marine algae, such as sargassum, is actually surplus in Caribbean locations. So he's throwing that out there as a possibility.
I'd be happy to have a facility in the Caribbean. You wouldn't, you could find me there any day.
Yeah.
Don't mention the opportunity to go somewhere warm and exotic to TJ. He's all over it.
Awesome. Someone wants to know, what is the limit? What's your capacity limit? I don't know.
So right now, our bottleneck, we're probably 6,000 to 10,000 pounds of finished goods a month, and it's a real challenge for us. Our next facility is going to be somewhere between 100,000 to 250,000 pounds of finished product a month. And that's really where we need to be in order to, one, put a dent in the whole food waste challenge, but two, supply some of the customers that we're in conversations with.
Awesome. Outside of the sources you mentioned, like the distribution centers, have you thought about engaging smaller suppliers of this food waste, and do you have a strategy for that?
We've done a model basically around every type of food waste, big, small, medium, everything in there, because at scale, we want to be able to really take a big dent out of this problem, not just in Atlantic Canada, but all around the globe. So there's so much opportunity. I think just an example is there's a food processing company that they make carrots and baby carrots, and in a month period they have about 40 million pounds of surplus cut-offs and shavings that are something we could definitely use, and that's just one processor.
Yeah. Someone wants to know if you'd like to share what portion is energy as a percent cost of production. And does that energy ratio affect any scaling up or expanding to other locations? So how does that factor in?
It's a critical piece. So obviously the person is very technical that asked that question. It's a key piece, and it's one of the first things we focused on. So finding the energy efficient drying process was critical. So on the one hand, we're dealing with waste stream material that we get for free, and then we're selling it to a customer. The process itself of converting it into a finished good couldn't be so expensive that it made that end product at a price point that just wouldn't make sense for a company. So to answer the question, it's incredibly energy efficient and very low in the overall scheme. And it had to be in order for us to be able to absorb some of the capital costs and the people resources that go into converting it into a finished good. So it's very low.
Okay, good. Someone's wondering if you're looking to license this technology.
We get asked that question probably once a week. You know, it's we're not opposed to that. Like, and the company that it's probably the largest food CPG brand company in the world. We had a call earlier today, and as TJ mentioned about the facility they have in Africa and the outreach that they do, they wondered if it made sense we would out-license it to put it in one of their facilities there just to deal with the waste stream, and of course the famine that is such a big issue in Africa. And so we're not opposed to any different variety of partnerships and relationships.
Awesome. Someone wants to know, have you considered the seafood sector? Can you deal with fish processing residues or fish products?
Coming from the East Coast, I'm not surprised someone had that question. And back to TJ's interest in sea plants. I love the sea plants too in the sea world, but we have terrific companies here that I think are doing a really good job already. I know we have a lot of waste, things of that nature, and of course our great success story with ocean nutrition and the processing of shells and getting chitin from those shells and making a market, and then also omega-3. So I think we have terrific companies here already addressing a lot of the fish and seafood challenges. That's not to say that our stuff wouldn't work in that front. We've never done the R&D on it, and you're talking to two vegans too. So there's no seafood, there's no meat, there's no animal products that have entered our process, and we'd like to keep it that way. And somebody may come along and develop a similar process, but do it for meats and fish and things of that nature.
Very interesting. Yeah. Well, I think there'd be a lot of people on the line today that might be interested in something like that. So, contact our team and we'll be happy to facilitate introductions. You never know. Questions are slowing down, but there's a few here still. I don't want to grill you too much. I feel like this was pretty intense. We had about 16 questions, so I'm really pleased to see that from our audience. Are you up for a couple more before I sign off?
Absolutely. Yeah, all good. Yeah.
Need a break? Okay.
To talk.
Can you talk about the quality metrics you use post-drying on the powders? Are you looking at, I guess it would depend on the product, but are you looking at bioactivity or protein?
Yes, we do full. So we can't send a product out unless we have a clean certificate of analysis. So there's a full micro done on it, heavy metal testing, full nutrition panel, and prior to that, it's a full organoleptic. So it's a visual inspection, it's a smell, it's a taste. And again, if you're selling dehydrated fruits, the appearance, the color, and how vibrant the color is and the smell, it's a critical piece in the equation when for somebody who's going to buy our product and use it in a consumer packaged good. It has to have all those terrific, vibrant colors and smells that whole fresh state. So we have a visual organoleptic profile, and then we also have a full spectral analysis of it as well.
Awesome. Have you, could you comment on if there's any particular advantages to being in Atlantic Canada as opposed to other parts of the world to set up this company? So that's a lot of what our conference is about, is showcasing opportunities to create new businesses in the bioeconomy space. So just wondering if you had any lessons or learnings there.
I mean, I think it's a great place to do business. Like of course, I'm a bit biased. I grew up in the Maritimes, but I've lived a lot of different places. I lived in Ontario and out west. And my last company I built here, and I had terrific support and great people to help along the way. And this one is no different. This situation, and I think the nature of our company is one of which we really welcome government involvement. And I know a lot of startups, founders can be said that they like the money from government, but they don't like the involvement of government. This is a situation, and we're in a geographic location where we want their money and we also want their involvement, because this has for governments and also for business. So it's been terrific being here in Atlantic Canada. It's been really beneficial for the company, and the support, both people-wise and also financial and opportunities, it's been great. And even dealing with this COVID-19 situation, again, the government involvement is advantageous. So I'd recommend anybody that's getting into something of this nature, if you're living here and contemplating it, I think it's great. Having said that, there's challenges in doing business from Nova Scotia. Really, you have to get yourself to Toronto before you can get a flight to go anywhere else. There are some shipping and logistical challenges with that. But in terms of what we've done to date and what other companies have done to date, Atlantic Canada has become a really good starting ground, I think, for a lot of companies to get going. And we've built a really neat case study around the farms here, the food manufacturers here, and also the grocer and grocer distribution networks. And that's come as a result of close ties and networks and personal relationships. So Atlantic Canada is famous for a great, warm, and friendly hospitality.
Awesome. I think that's a great note to end on. I'll take you off of the the hot seat now with all the questions. There's a few questions left in the box, but we'll maybe send them to you afterwards and then see if we can just send some answers by email. So Darren, TJ, thank you so much. It was a great conversation. A lot more back and forth with the audience than I expected, but that's great. So I think it's a really interesting topic, and I appreciate you taking an hour out of your busy business, everything that's going on with Scale Up and COVID. Really appreciate you spending some time with us today. I just have one little announcement before I sign off, and that is, so we're doing this monthly virtual speaker series, but we're taking a break for July. In July, we're actually going to be handing it off to Ignite Atlantic, and Nova Scotia Innovation Hub and BioNB are supporting them with this, what we call the Start 2020 competition. So this is an opportunity for early stage bioresource companies to pitch to win a prize package. We had the initial round of selections already happened, and we were supposed to have a on-stage event at Atlantic BioCon. So on July 14th, we'll be doing that virtually. So invite everyone to check that out. You can visit the links that I put in the chat for Atlantic BioCon. You can also go to start2020.ca. We'll be announcing the 5 finalists tomorrow. And you can follow along and find out how to sign up to listen to that presentation and judging on July 14th. So that is my promotion for the end of this session. Again, I want to thank Outcast Foods for joining us today. It was a great session. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.